Welcome to ICEX and the Arctic Environmental and Safety Awareness Training video of the United States Navy. ICEX is a unique opportunity to conduct real-world training, test equipment, support important scientific research, and maintain military readiness of the Navy's submarine forces in the Arctic. To support the month-long ICEX, the Navy establishes a camp on the Beaufort Sea's pack ice, which is managed by dedicated camp staff led by the ICEX Camp Operations Officer. During ICEX, like all training and testing activities, the Navy is committed to being good stewards of the environment. The Arctic is a sensitive and largely untouched ecosystem, so it is critical that ICEX has the smallest environmental footprint possible. This means minimizing environmental impacts and following all permit requirements, U.S. environmental laws, and Navy policy. This training video will identify the key elements of these requirements, laws, and policies. While at ICE Camp, you must follow all requirements included in this video and should consult the camp manual or ask camp staff whenever you are unsure of procedures or have questions. The first segment in this video discusses species awareness specific to the Arctic environment, including the animals that you will most likely observe during ICEX. Minimizing impacts on species is required by environmental laws and is also a matter of personal safety. The second segment reviews environmental considerations such as trash management, human waste, and gray water. The third segment identifies requirements for handling and storing oils, fuels, and other hazardous materials, as well as how to respond to spills or leaks. The fourth segment addresses general safety concerns. These include specific challenges and dangers of working in an extremely cold and remote location. You are expected to follow the information provided in this video and all applicable environmental laws, Navy policy, and permit requirements. Doing so will help reduce impacts on the environment and keep personnel safe from harm. Additionally, violations of the law could lead to civil or even criminal penalties. While participating in ICEX, all personnel must minimize impacts to wildlife. This is required by Navy policy, detailed in permits issued by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service, and legally required under the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Specific species you may encounter at ICE camp or out on the pack ice include ringed seals, polar bears, and the Arctic fox. These Arctic species are also significant to Alaska natives, both culturally and economically, and are an important source for subsistence hunting. A safe distance must be maintained from any of these animals. When on foot, the required standoff distance is a minimum of 50 meters. When traveling by snowmobile or other vehicle, the required standoff distance is 100 meters. Although these are the minimum requirements, stay further away if possible. This is to minimize any impact on these species, but is also a matter of personal safety, particularly with polar bears. Polar bears should be avoided at any distance and reported to the ICEX Camp Operations Officer or the assigned polar bear watch immediately. Additionally, any sightings of other species should be reported to the ICEX Camp Operations Officer as soon as possible. For any wildlife that you encounter during ICEX, keep your distance, even if you are further away than the required minimum standoff. Never approach them, and avoid any activity that will disrupt their natural behaviors or possibly cause harm. Ringed seals, when not in the water, are usually in lairs excavated under deeper snowpack or ridges where ice sheets have been pushed together. Ringed seals usually maintain a breathing hole within their lairs from which they can enter and exit the water, so they may not always be visible on the surface of the ice. They may maintain other breathing holes near their lairs as well, so approach any opening in the ice with caution. During ICEX, seals may also appear in any new holes created in the camp for diving or other activities. If seals are sighted either on the ice or in a hole in the ice, remain calm and allow the animal to leave on its own. Avoid any interaction. Divers should be particularly vigilant when entering or exiting the water. The camp location is in an area unlikely to include seal lairs, So the most probable interaction with seals above water is when traveling by snowmobile during a field party, or if a seal emerges from one of the holes created by the camp. When transiting, use tracks from previous snowmobile activity when possible, and avoid driving over pressure ridges or snowdrifts. Such areas may have a seal layer hidden below the surface, and a seal could be harmed if a snowmobile was to inadvertently cause a layer to collapse by traveling over top. Polar bears are large, dangerous animals, and camp staff should be alerted immediately of any sighting. As a safety precaution, the camp maintains a bear watch 24/7, with personnel monitoring the camp perimeter who are specifically permitted and trained by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They will take steps to deter a bear, and if necessary, will intervene if the bear endangers the camp or individuals at the camp. If a polar bear is in the camp, seek shelter immediately until you are alerted that the bear has moved away. If you are in the field, immediately alert the designated bear guard and follow their directions. Remember, under no circumstances should you ever approach a polar bear. They are surprisingly fast and can sprint at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. Can you? Polar bears can be drawn to camp by the smell of food, so it is essential to always follow proper food storage and waste management procedures, as detailed in Part 2 of this video. Arctic foxes are fast-moving and generally avoid human contact, so it's unlikely you will see any during ICEX. If a fox is sighted, allow it to leave the area and report the sighting. Food smells are an attractant, so following proper food storage and waste management procedures will reduce the likelihood of encountering an Arctic fox near camp. In summary, be on the lookout for any wildlife and always maintain at least the minimum standoff distance required. Avoid any interactions and report all sightings. If you have any questions while at ICEX, ask camp staff and refer to the camp manual for more information. In order to be good stewards of the environment, the ICEX camp is designed to have the smallest environmental footprint possible. All camp participants are required to follow applicable U.S. laws and the specific rules and regulations detailed in the permits for this activity, issued by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and the Environmental Protection Agency. The first step is to minimize the amount of trash and waste created at the camp. Remove excess packaging and other sources of trash before departing the mainland. Remember, anything you bring in will need to be brought back out when you leave camp. Handling food waste appropriately is important for both environmental and safety reasons. If polar bears smell food, they may be drawn to camp and potentially endanger people and property. It's essential to never put any food waste in general use trash receptacles. All food waste must be placed in a designated bear bin for safe storage. Examples of food waste include any uneaten food, wrappers and packaging that were in contact with food, and any beverage containers. For general trash collection, each camp structure will have a general use waste container. These containers will be emptied daily into tri-wall boxes staged near the runway. These are never to be used for food waste. Examples of general trash include paper waste and all other inert materials with no food residue or hazardous material content. No oils, fuels, rags, or hazardous waste should be placed in either food waste or general waste containers. The storage and disposal of these materials is regulated, so they may only be placed in containers specifically designated for their storage. Discharges of wastewater from the camp are subject to regulation under the Clean Water Act. The only discharges allowed from the camp are gray water from the galley sink, gray water from the hygiene station where you can wash your face and hands, and wastewater from the reverse osmosis system. Each of these outflows is subject to permit requirements and will be monitored and sampled regularly by camp operations personnel. These are absolutely the only discharges allowed. No other gray water or sewage shall be discharged at the ice camp. While at the camp, participants will use the WAG bag system for human waste disposal. WAG bags are single-use bags for collecting human waste that include an absorbent, odor-trapping gel. Inside a privacy tent, inner and outer bags are placed into a toilet seat. Human waste goes into the inner bag. After use, the inner bag is folded into the outer bag, and the outer bag is sealed. The sealed bag is then placed in a drum designated only for human waste. The only exception to these procedures for human waste is when personnel are away from the camp with a field party and do not have access to WAG bags. During any field party outside the camp area, human waste can be left on the ice. All other trash and waste created during a field party must be brought back to ice camp and placed in the appropriate camp waste containers. Throughout ICEX, all food, general, hazardous, and human waste will be flown to the mainland for proper disposal. In summary, minimize what you bring to the ice camp and handle all waste appropriately to reduce the impact that ICEX has on the environment. Our permits and U.S. laws require it. Remember, except for permitted gray water discharges from the galley sink, hygiene station, and reverse osmosis system in camp, and human waste during remote field parties, no participants may dump any liquid or solid waste onto the ice or into the Beaufort Sea. Navy policy and U.S. law mandate that oil, fuel, and other hazardous materials must never be released into the environment. During the ice camp, these materials must be stored and handled correctly. If there is a spill or leak, regardless of the amount, it must be reported. Any handling of these types of materials requires camp staff approval. All personnel who are involved in fuel handling and transfer will receive training in spill prevention and cleanup prior to arriving at camp. If you have not received this training and you require equipment to be refueled or fuel to be transferred, do not conduct these operations on your own, but instead ask for assistance from camp staff who are properly trained. In the event of a spill, immediately notify camp personnel. A primary precaution against spills and leaks for all fixed fuel storage and equipment is the use of secondary containment. This allows immediate containment of any discharge from a fuel storage container, generator, or other equipment, making it easier to clean up and keep out of the environment. If you notice any problems with this secondary containment, such as a rip, folded edge, or improper placement of containers, alert camp personnel. All machinery that requires daily or periodic refueling requires the use of spill pads during fueling operations. These allow for any small spill or drip to be absorbed by the pad and kept from entering the environment. Spill pads are used for refueling portable generators, snowmobiles, ice augers, and other equipment. Particular caution must be taken whenever fuel storage containers are transported or when recovering fuel barrels from an airdrop. Take care not to damage or rupture containers and watch for potential leaks. In the event of a larger spill, it may be necessary to create an ice berm to stop the spill from spreading out over the ice and potentially leaking into the sea. Depending on the size of the ice berm required and personnel available, you may be asked to assist. In case of a small spill or temporary leak, a rag may be used to clean up oil or fuel. After use, the rag should be disposed of in the appropriate waste container. Separate containers are provided for the collection of oily rags, grease, and any waste oils that may result from fueling or spill cleanup operations. These wastes should never be put in general trash or food waste containers. Remember, any spill, regardless of size, must be reported to camp staff. Be aware that personal items such as aerosol cans, batteries, cigarette lighters, and other items may be considered hazardous material and must be inspected for approval before they are allowed to be transported to camp. If you have a question about a particular item or material, ask camp staff. In summary, proper handling and storage of fuels and hazardous materials is essential to avoid spills or any harm to the environment. If you have any questions about how to handle something that might be considered environmentally damaging, ask camp personnel and follow their directions. ICEX takes place in one of the world's most challenging environments. Living and conducting complex activities in a remote and extremely cold environment leaves little margin for error. To operate safely and effectively, you must be proactive and plan appropriately. First and foremost, this means maintaining proper body temperature. Exposure, even for a few minutes, can lead to serious frostbite. Temperatures can range from 20 degrees Fahrenheit to 40 degrees below, or possibly even colder, especially with wind chill. It is much harder to re-warm your body than to stay warm in the first place, so be proactive. Dress in layers and get to a warmer area if you're feeling chilled. Details on appropriate clothing for ice camp, including suggested layers, can be found in the camp manual. Read it and prepare appropriately. Fractures and voids in the ice represent another significant danger. Looks may be deceiving, and the ice structure is constantly changing. Cracks and fissures may develop beneath even a solid-looking surface, so step carefully and do not assume ice that was solid one day will remain solid over time. This view from ICEX 2016 highlights the risks of changing ice conditions on camp infrastructure and is a primary reason why the ICEX team has modified the ice camp to be more mobile. If you notice any weak areas or shifting ice, alert camp staff. During ICEX, you are operating in a remote area with infrequent connections to the mainland. In case of any injury or medical condition, report it to the medical officer immediately. Do not wait until you think something is serious, because weather, distance, and other factors mean evacuation and access to medical resources are not a given. Staying safe and healthy means monitoring all areas of your health and well-being. The Arctic is a harsh environment, so eat well, sleep well, and take care of yourself to keep up your energy. Remember, there are always snacks and hot coffee in the mess tent to warm up. The Arctic winter has very low humidity, creating desert-like conditions. While you may not feel thirsty, it is easy to dehydrate without realizing it, and dehydration increases the risk of sustaining a cold weather injury. Try to keep track of how much you're drinking, so it's easier for you to know you're staying adequately hydrated, and remember to pack extra water for any field party. The recommended daily consumption varies from a minimum of 3.5 quarts to over 5 quarts of water a day in circumstances involving heavy exertion. Darker than normal or infrequent urination is an immediate sign that you are not drinking enough. Fatigue and confusion are also signs of dehydration. If you have any of these symptoms, drink more fluids immediately and notify the medical officer if symptoms persist. Only approved field parties may leave the immediate vicinity of ice camp. Never venture off alone from camp. Never approach an operating helicopter or fixed-wing aircraft without approval from the pilot or ice camp staff. Only authorized personnel may operate snowmobiles or other camp equipment. Alcohol is not allowed at ice camp. Remember to stay warm and hydrated. Maintain situational awareness at all times to avoid illness and injury, and immediately report any medical concerns. In summary, the Arctic is a harsh and challenging environment, so be proactive, plan appropriately, and follow camp safety measures and policy. Failure to do so not only puts you at risk, but can risk the safety of others while dealing with any emergency situation. ICEX is an important and challenging operation. It represents essential training and testing for the Navy. The success and the ability of the Navy to continue to conduct ice exercises rely on you following the rules and regulations. Remember what you have learned in this training and refer to the camp manual for more information. If you have any questions, ask camp staff. And remember, the camp operations officer is in charge at the camp. Have a safe and productive ICEX.